Ole Miss Rebels. As Mississippi's flagship university, we dig deeper, see farther, work harder. We pioneered human organ transplants. We helped prove Einstein's theory of gravitational waves. We are conducting life-changing research that solves the problems of today. We are Ole Miss, transforming lives and the world.
Hey, welcome to the POMcast with Stephen Willis. We're going to start in a few minutes, but I want to tell you to hit up our social sites, retweet, share, comment, like, do all of that stuff. It can only help us out and it'll make the show even better. But we're getting ready to give you a lot of good Ole Miss information, and I just thought I would tell you that because the POMcast is starting. Well, it's starting right now. Wait, no, that's a little early. It is starting right about now. Good morning. Welcome to the POMcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis, on this magical mystery tour we call Ole Miss Fandom. Thank you very much for joining us from the palatial Central Florida studios. We got some changes coming up and going about right now that we are going to tell you about. Some of the improvements are starting to get incorporated into the show, one of which will be the chat. Basically, anytime you comment inside the stream, whether it be on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, or Discord, which is always open, by the way, your comment will appear on the official chat of the show. I can always see the chat. It's going to come up for about 3 or 4 minutes. In a minute, it's just going to pop up, and everything that is there, you'll be able to see that, and you'll be able to see what people are asking, but there's other information that I want to get out as well. But if you do all that, I'll be able to see all of that and be able to react in due time. So you can participate in the show. You can have your say that way, even though the phone lines aren't quite open on the POMcast yet. We do intend to open the call-in lines very soon, sometime in a couple of weeks. We have a few more tests to run. But the nuts and bolts of it have been done, and we're excited about that. So we're going to have multiple call-in shows as this moves forward. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for listening. But if you comment in the chat, I can see what is being said. Before we get started, I want to tell you about Travel and Cruise World. Number is 1-800-330-7461. Again, that is 1-800-330-7461. And travelandcruiseworld.com. I'll tell you what I was trying to do with this. And I want you guys to be able to vacation and plan and do everything you need to do to make everything as enjoyable as possible. Well, these guys can provide a local perspective of all the Central Florida attractions. You can get out of the house, you can vacation, you can do whatever you want to. These guys know what's going on. So travelandcruiseworld.com, they will for sure help you out. Also, if you want to watch the POMcast, you can catch it on Twitter at @TheStephenWillis or at Old Positively. You can catch us on Facebook at facebook.com/POMcast. Positively Ole Miss on YouTube. Hit the bell, subscribe. You'll not only know we're streaming, you'll know what we're streaming about, and you can catch us on Twitch at Positively Ole Miss, all one word. Also, for the podcast on audio, you can catch us on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. We're also on several other smaller podcatchers, but that would take a ton of time to get to, and it would take our whole show. It's only a half-hour show. We've already used 3 minutes of it talking about these things. So today on the show, we're going to talk about Ole Miss being the first football program, college or NFL, to be 100% vaxxed and what that means. And secondly, we'll talk a little bit about fall camp. Yesterday was the first day of fall camp. It was an acclimation day. Not a lot can be gleaned from that, but those first 3 days have to happen before you can get into real practices. You can try and maximize that and do whatever you want to do, but it's still an acclimation day. I feel sorry for the video guys coming in. I remember when we used to have to do set the cameras out like 2 hours before practice, make sure they were outside so they could acclimate to the humidity, because they would just completely fog over and you wouldn't be able to see them. So that's one thing That is quite interesting. But Ole Miss, 100% vaxxed as a football program. This is fantastic news. They want to take it as a moral high ground for the rest of the state. Absolutely. Mississippi, as we know, currently is next to last in vaccination rates around the country, with last place being Alabama. But this 100% vaxxed inside this environment. Now, we'll give you a little background on this, what's going on. Now, Greg Sankey at Media Days mentioned the possibility of forfeits for not being eligible to play, to have breakouts. So obviously 2 weeks ago, the wheels kind of kept on going. And you heard sources for multiple weeks talk about how Ole Miss was, I don't know, the 40 to 60 range. The number was always different, but they were always talking to somebody that turned out to be deathly wrong, considering these vaccines take 2 weeks to get what needs to be got. But of this 100% vaccine means you don't have to worry about all the testing. You don't have to worry about all the hang-ups that other programs might have to deal with. Now, with Ole Miss hitting 100% vaxxed, that provides Ole Miss a competitive advantage. All these things that you don't have to worry about doing that they do, that is a competitive advantage. So I expect to see more programs hit that number in the coming weeks. As the first couple of weeks, they see how much of a pain in the butt this is going to be to test it. I expect that to change in the coming weeks. But it's a major competitive advantage, especially in this state. I imagine they did it, for competitive advantage, because that's the way football coaches think. They think about wins and losses, and the potential of an out-of-your-control forfeit scares the heck out of them. So they started to push. They found a way to make it happen. Good for them. But in Mississippi, much like Florida, where we are right now, much like Alabama, much like Georgia, it is a shit show at the moment. All the hospitals are full. Somebody got, I think I saw on Twitter, somebody got appendicitis the other day and went into septic. They were able to get him done because it became an emergency. And he has to have a special diet for the rest of his life because the hospitals are full. See, it's not necessarily that the hospitals are full. It is the normal wear and tear stuff that we could normally handle fairly easily gets put on the back burner because of everything being taken up by this virus. So Lane Kiffin and his team figured out a way. Good on them. Absolutely good on them. They figured out a way to have a competitive advantage. And you'll see the way this guy recruits, the way this guy wants to do. Everything is about an advantage. Last year against Alabama, in the game against Alabama last year, the team warmed up in the IPF. It was a rainy day. Didn't want wet jerseys and everything doing. But it was also mind games with Nick Saban. Also, that got outlawed after that game because of, yeah. But he's always looking for a little bit of a competitive advantage. And being 100% vaxxed, he can absolutely claim that moving forward because all the headaches and all the stuff they do, it all can go back on the back burner. Now, they're still probably going to have to wear masks indoors and do things like that, but all the crazy testing and all of that stuff, COVID becomes like the flu at that point. And if you're not having to worry about going to the hospital, you're not having to worry about dying from it, all of a sudden it becomes a relatively manageable disease that we can do. We figured out a little bit how to treat it, figured out everything that is going on. But this 100% vaccination is a huge deal. Not even if you put them up on a pedestal to the rest of the country or in the state or however you handle it, it's going to become and is a big deal to the national media and the people that are trying to, over scare people by what's going on. I mean, that's fine. They can do whatever they want to do, but that's what they're doing. this is going to provide a safe haven. You're not going to be picked on. You're not going to be looked down on. You're going to be put up on the pedestal as being the only vaccinated team in college football, and they are right now. I think others will join them. I don't think, as competitive as these coaches are, Ole Miss is going to stay as the lone holdout until, for much longer. There's people going to do what they have to do that. But being vaccinated, not having to go through all that rigmarole, can concentrate on football and do all that thing. That will provide a competitive advantage. I do think you're probably going to get out of here early today. Thank you very much for listening. But when we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the first day of camp. First day of camp. I'm excited about that and everything that is going on. And let's see. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the first day of camp. It's not, got a few highlights of what's going on, some players and all that. But we'll talk a little bit about what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, and all of that stuff right here. So stick around. All right, welcome back to the POMcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis. Glad you are joining us. We're probably going to get out of here a little bit early today, but I do want to talk about day one of fall camp and everything that has gone on. They reported on Saturday, and the first practice was on Sunday. And that's a little bit more compressed than we're used to. I think that's probably a COVID thing, to be perfectly honest. But they were able to do that. And with them reporting, with them kind of, let's see, make sure. All right. Just wanted to make sure there's no sound coming through. Them reporting and with them going, that was probably that day, any holdouts, anything going on with the vaccine and the practice, because this appears to be a focused group of players. Whenever they want to play football, whatever they want to do, this is a focused group of players, and they don't want anything to get in the way of their goal. Now, I do not know what their goal is. I do not know what they expect to do. I do not know what they want to do, but their goal is single-minded. There's a focus in this group, and that makes me very happy moving forward and whenever we handle all of these things. Because whenever you look at teams that go, whenever everybody's pulling the rope the same way, they can accomplish some stuff. Whenever they do different things, there's going to be some separation, there's going to be some problems. And if you go back to the Ed Orgeron era at Ole Miss, whenever 5 groups of people are pulling in 5 different directions, you get a 3-8 with a team that had the talent to be one of the best in football. But I mean, it is what it is. It really is what it is, and I'm excited about it. Now, these days, there's not a lot that you can glean from these. There just aren't. Whenever you deal with acclimation days these days, shirts and shorts, get used to wearing your helmet, get used to the heat a little bit, and it's kind of nice. It's an acclimation day. It is what it is. But you need these days to get to the hardcore days. So the main thing about this one is you want to see a ton of energy. You want to see no players get hurt. You want to start putting into the new guys your basic offense, whatever you're doing. And if you handle those for those 3 days, now there's really 2 days because the third day is shoulder pads, so there'll be a little bit of thumping that day. There'll be a little bit of thud that day. And if you get to those and start practicing fully, you can really get into the camp spirit and the camp, what they're doing. And this is important for the first part of the season. And if you can concentrate entirely on that camp aspect like we used to could, and now Ole Miss can because of the vaccination, it's an advantage. It is a true competitive advantage if Ole Miss can have a real uninterrupted camp, and down the road in Starkville or up in Nashville or wherever you are, they're having to do things and break up the learning sessions of the offense and defense because of testing. All these things take time. Camp's a long slog of an event. Whenever I worked at Ole Miss, camp went from, for me, a little bit before 5 in the morning until about 10 o'clock at night. Every day for 3 weeks. That was the schedule that we were kind of on. And it was just important that people are ready to go. People talk about LSU and make fun of the fact that their locker room has beds that it could be folded out in. That makes sense until you understand the camp dynamic, where a player is literally asked to be here 18 hours. And they need a place to go. They need a place to rest. They need someplace comfortable because other than that, they're just laying on the floor or out in the IPF on the grass, on the track. There's a lot of laying on the track. So that's the way camp looks. That's the way it looks moving forward. And it's important that we find amenities that will fit them for this situation, which they will eventually. They're getting ready to start on the Manning Center renovation. Second of all, understand the time frame involved and understand that all the testing and everything, all the protocols that are in place because of COVID inhibits your learning. It inhibits the normal dissemination of information. Now, you got a ton of freshmen. This is going to allow them to play a little bit easy. This is going to allow everything to work a little bit well. I would expect them to do 2 sets of offense, 2 sets of defense when they're doing practice, just for reps, and get those guys in the higher end more reps, get those younger guys more reps. I expect them to do that. They did that a little bit last year. So they're in position on day one and after day one of fall camp to do things really well. And they should be ready to go by the fall because we talked all last season about how this affected the defense. All the changes moved over. The offense clicked a little bit because the offense is actually fairly simple. There's rules and tags and things you have to learn, but it's a fairly simple offense. You have to be to go that fast. But on defense, there's still a little bit of matchup, and the defense has had trouble catching up to the style of play that is taking over college football at the moment. And so through lack of film, lack of practices, lack of personnel to be able to actually put eyes on them, at the beginning of the year there was a big problem. By the end, they were okay. They were serviceable by the end of the year when they film and the personnel, whenever coaches could lay eyes on people. So they were able to catch up towards the end of the year. But in the beginning of the year, it was a pretty bad dumpster fire. It really was. And it's important to understand that. Now, after a spring, this fall camp uninterrupted is important. All these new players coming in is important. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that defensive side of the ball develops over the course of the next month and how they look going into the Louisville game when Malik Cunningham and the guys line up on the other side of them. Ton of ex-Ole Miss coaches, by the way, coaching for Louisville at the moment. So that's interesting. And well, other than B. Brown as well, who is a former Ole Miss player. He's the defensive coordinator up there. So I look forward to seeing how exactly this looks. And I want to see the maturity of Matt Corral. I want to see the disaster games go away. And I want to see some of these young receivers step up and get in the group. Because as a wide receiver, Dontarie Drummond, Jonathan Mingo, and Jacour Pearson, John Rice Plumlee, that's a pretty nice first three. We don't substitute. Remember, we do not substitute that much. But I want to see Braylon Brown. I want to see J.J. Henry. I want to see Brandon Buckhalter. And by week 2, we should be able to see all of those guys because of the new redshirt rule and the one-time transfer rule and all things like that. There's an impetus on getting those guys some playing time. So should be fairly interesting, and I'm very excited about that. Now, the other thing I want to talk about today, and I'm only going to talk about this for a couple minutes, is I'm going to rant a little bit about anonymous sources. For ever since Greg Sankey said what he said, anonymous sources everywhere has said we are nowhere near where we need to be. Over and over and over again. They put out, I've heard a 40% number and I've heard a 60% number from anonymous sources. And then it just comes out, they just drop it that we're 100% vaccinated. Why? How? How did that happen? Well, the reality is, in a world where pollsters get lied to protect information, we've had 2 election cycles now where the polls have been deadly wrong. Why would we automatically assume that the anonymous sources giving information is correct and not just trying to feed an agenda, whatever they're trying to do? Why do we assume that? I mean, it's gotten to the point where we need to be smart about the news that are coming in. And if you're not willing to put your name to it, I'm not really willing to listen to it. Because there's too many cases of anonymous sources being wrong. Now, used to back in the day, back when the Clarion Ledger and Rusty Hampton and Rick Cleveland and all those guys were doing their thing at the Clarion Ledger back in the 80s, they were hitting about 50% from anonymous sources on their breaking news or rumors or whatever they were recording. They were hitting about 50%, which was fairly good. And it made what they were doing seem worth it. But fast forward about 40 years later, it's now below 20%. It's got to the point where if you hear something, well, it might be right, but 80% or so is going to be false. So you don't know what's going to be true or not. And this is going to be a side effect, I will say. How about a side effect of Lane Kiffin's program, where they do not talk to the media? There's a natural distrust of the media. They understand whenever the pre-started, whenever it's like, hey, don't listen to this guy, he's dangerous, and then that guy has to suck up. It doesn't matter. There's a natural distrust